the midnight disturbance. Officer Laura Simmons was used to the late shifts. The stillness of the night, broken only by the occasional passing car or distant siren, had become a comforting routine over her 7 years on the force. But tonight was different. There was something unsettling in the air, a heaviness that clung to her like a cold sweat. She was cruising down Birchwood Avenue when the call came through. Unit 17, we have a report of a possible intruder at 56 Willow Lane. Neighbour reported seeing someone in the house. No answer when the homeowner was contacted. Laura frowned. Willow Lane was a quiet street, lined with old Victorian-style homes, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and nothing ever happened. She flipped on her lights and sped toward the address, her mind running through the usual protocols. When she arrived, the house in question was dark, except for a dim light coming from an upstairs window. The lawn was overgrown, and the house itself looked like it hadn't been cared for in years odd, since she knew an elderly couple lived there. She had seen them on her patrols, always tending to the garden or sitting on the porch. She stepped out of the cruiser, her breath misting in the cool night air. The street was eerily quiet, not even the rustle of leaves to break the silence. Her footsteps were the only sound as she approached the front door, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. "Police. Is anyone home?" she called out, rapping on the door. There was no response. She tried the handle, it was unlocked. Pushing the door open, she was met with a faint, musty smell, like the house had been closed up for a long time. "Hello? This is Officer Simmons. I'm here to help." Still nothing. "Gun." She stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The living room was just as she remembered it from the last time she had been inside a few years back, during a neighborhood watch meeting. The furniture was old but well kept, photos of the couple with what she assumed were grandchildren lining the mantel. Everything seemed normal, except for the oppressive silence that filled the house. She moved cautiously through the rooms, checking each one as she went. The kitchen was empty, the back door locked. The dining room was untouched, a fine layer of dust on the table. The only place left to check was upstairs. Laura ascended the creaking staircase, her flashlight beam revealing more family photos lining the walls. The light she had seen from outside was coming from a room at the end of the hall, the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of yellow light spilling into the hallway. She pushed the door open with her foot, her flashlight aimed inside. The room was empty, but the bed was unmade, sheets tangled and thrown to one side as if someone had left in a hurry. A single lamp on the nightstand cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. Laura's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. She moved further into the room, noticing a faint sound like someone whispering. She froze, straining to listen. The whispering grew louder, coming from the closet across the room. Slowly she approached, her hand gripping the gun at her side. With a quick motion, she yanked open the closet door, her flashlight revealing a scene that made her blood run cold. Inside the closet, crouched in the corner, was the elderly woman, Mrs. Harper. Her eyes were wide with terror, her hands trembling as she rocked back and forth, muttering to herself. "Mrs. Harper," Laura said gently, lowering her weapon. "It's Officer Simmons. Are you all right?" The woman didn't respond, her gaze fixed on something far away, something Laura couldn't see. Laura reached out, placing a hand on the woman's shoulder. "Mrs. Harper, it's okay. You're safe now." But as she touched her, Mrs. Harper suddenly stopped muttering and looked directly at Laura. Her eyes filled with an emotion Laura couldn't quite place: fear. Yes, but also something else. Something darker. "They're still here," Mrs. Harper whispered, her voice barely audible. Laura felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Who's still here, Mrs. Harper?" "They're hiding," the woman replied, her voice shaking. "They never left. They're always here." Laura's hand tightened on her flashlight as she scanned the room again. "Who's here, Mrs. Harper? Is someone else in the house?" Before Mrs. Harper could answer, there was a sudden loud bang from downstairs, like a door slamming shut. Laura's heart leaped into her throat. She instinctively reached for her radio, but all she got was static. "I need you to stay here," Laura said to Mrs. Harper, who had resumed her rocking and muttering. "I'll be right back." She moved quickly out of the room, her gun drawn now. Every step she took was accompanied by the sound of her own racing heartbeat. She reached the top of the stairs and peered down into the darkness below. The front door was wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze. She was certain she had closed it when she came in. Swallowing her fear, Laura descended the stairs, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. She approached the open door cautiously, sweeping the area with her light. There was no sign of anyone, just the silent, empty street outside. She was about to step out onto the porch when she heard a noise behind her, a low, guttural growl, so deep and inhuman that it made her blood turn to ice. She spun around, but the hallway behind her was empty, just as it had been moments before. The growling continued, coming from all around her now, echoing off the walls. Laura backed away, her mind screaming at her to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming shapes that shouldn't be there, faces emerging from the darkness with eyes that gleamed with malice. She stumbled back toward the stairs, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The growling grew louder, almost deafening, and then suddenly it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. And then she felt a presence behind her, cold and menacing. She turned slowly, flashlight trembling in her hand, to find the front door had closed on its own. Standing in front of it was a figure, tall and shadowy, its features obscured by the darkness. Laura opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved closer, its form shifting and warping as it approached. She raised her gun, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely aim. "Stay back," she managed to choke out, her voice cracking with fear. But the figure didn't stop. It loomed over her now, its face coming into view, a twisted, contorted mask of rage and despair. And then, just as it reached out for her, everything went black. When she woke up, she was lying on the porch of the Harper house, the morning sun just starting to rise. Her radio crackled to life beside her, the dispatcher's voice sounding distant and distorted. "Officer Simmons, what's your status? Are you okay?" Laura sat up slowly, her head spinning. The house was quiet now, the front door standing wide open, as if inviting her back inside. But she didn't move. She couldn't bring herself to go back in. Instead, she grabbed her radio with trembling hands and responded, "This is Simmons. I'm okay?" But she knew she wasn't, and she wasn't sure she ever would be again.